Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. If you're new to the broadcast, every other episode is a live Q&A where parents and alumni of our programs can attend live and ask questions. You can always send in questions, even if you're not an alumni or a parent in our program. You can always send in questions to webinar@evoketherapy.com. Those questions go to the top of the queue, and then we answer those in the order that they're received. I think we have one long question to begin, a multi-parter, and then we have some live questions coming in. So with that, let me get to the first pre-submitted question. Somebody says, can you please shed some light on when a person has narcissistic traits and when they have a narcissistic personality disorder? You know, in fact, Maddie, you can look it up. One of my favorite broadcasts ever was on the narcissistic wound and on narcissism. And I love talking about this topic, I think mostly because of all the mental health subjects and diagnoses, this is still the one that people are allowed to use in a derogatory fashion. There's virtually no other diagnoses that you can use as an insult casually to somebody to describe somebody or in the public domain. And because of that, it garners a particular amount of my compassion. So let's start off with what narcissism is, and then let's talk about what the traits are. First of all, narcissism arises from the narcissistic wound, of course. And the narcissistic wound, very generally described, is the wound of not being seen, of not being heard, of not being understood. It's the wound of being seen or valued for the successes, the pretty parts, the good parts, the talented, the smart parts of us. So when a person gets valued and seen and gets attention and affection when they're doing the good thing, the smart thing, the successful thing, and then they get no attention or negative attention when they're making mistakes, when they're struggling, when their fallibilities, their humanness shows up in the arena and the equation, that person then develops a pattern of only wanting to be good, of wanting to present the good. If that pattern of needing to be good becomes a dominant pattern that really characterizes their entire personality, then the person crosses a threshold eventually where they qualify for narcissistic personality disorder. So like all disorders, you can have traits, you can have aspects. If you read the diagnostic manual, you would identify to some degree with some of them. But whether it crosses that threshold of a diagnosis relates to how much is it affecting your life, your relationships, your career, academic success, your physical health. And if it starts to affect those things, then it crosses the thresholds and becomes the diagnosis. But everybody has some narcissism. Children, for example, have lots of it. That self-centeredness, that need to be good, need to be right, need to be the pretty one, the successful one, the talented one. All of us struggle at some point with constructive feedback and negative feedback. There are two styles generally of the narcissistic pattern. One is the grandiose, which is the more classic version of it, or the overt narcissist. That is somebody who looks arrogant, cocky, who's very defensive, who will insult, attack, demean others, who are reflecting back anything less than perfection. That's the overt or grandiose narcissist. The covert or the depressed narcissist is one who doesn't necessarily demonstrate this sense of grandiosity, but everything is about them. They take on what would be considered much more of a victim, a helpless, a kind of a martyred stance. So instead of when they get criticism, they don't attack or demean the other person or go on the offensive. They will say things like, I'm a horrible mother, I'm a horrible father, I'm a horrible person, I'm a horrible, it's all my fault. I can do nothing right. It's still that need to be good. And in a very large way, this is maybe overstating it a little bit, but it can be understood that need to be good is a universal human trait. How many people do you know who are good at receiving criticism? How many people do you know are good at receiving difficult feelings from another person when those feelings are directed to them? If somebody can hear that you hurt me, you upset me, you angered me, you disappointed me. There are very few people that are excellent at that. And the ones who are, the rare and the few who are, you would say, have very little narcissistic wounding or have healed their narcissistic wounding, because they can be the bad object. They can be the bad one. But for the most part, most human beings need the badness to be out there in another person. It can't be in me. It's too threatening. I won't be loved. I'm not worthy of connection. I have nothing to add. I'm not valuable. One of the things that my therapist taught me when I was a teenager is that that sense of superiority, a superiority complex, in other words, is always a cover-up for an inferiority complex. And that's hard to believe, because sometimes grandiose narcissists are so convincing at behaving in such a way that you really believe that they believe that they're the best, that they're the greatest, that they have no faults, that they're the perfect one, that if there's a fault in the relationship or the situation, they truly believe it. It seems to be. They truly believe that it's somebody else's fault, that they hold no accountability. So in some ways, the severity of the diagnosis can be depicted by how convincing or how much the person believes it themselves. But everybody has a little bit of it. And I think one of the most interesting things about this particular question, the diagnosis and the traits of narcissism, is that almost everybody that I see write about it, including people with lots of letters after their name, is in denial in a large part about their own narcissism. You know that somebody's not in denial about their own narcissism, obviously, when they talk about that they themselves struggle with it. You also know that somebody's not in denial about their own narcissism because they don't lash out at other narcissists with anger and derision and disgust. Some people get very defensive when they hear me talk about narcissism in this compassionate way. I mean, it becomes very threatening to people. I think I get my most negative responses from people on my social media or on my podcasts when I respond to the narcissistic personality disorder or its traits with compassion. Nothing else that I do triggers such a negative response as does my compassionate view of narcissism. But again, that's indicative of the fact that most people are in denial about their narcissism. Most people don't want to be that. It's the one diagnosis where we can pin all of our sins on it. We can scapegoat individuals and the diagnosis, and we can say, that's not us. I might be borderline. I might be depressed. I might be anxious. I might be obsessive and compulsive. I might even struggle with alcoholism or other issues, but at least I'm not a narcissist. At least I'm not a monster. And again, the description or the title gets thrown around casually through mainstream media, on social media, and everyday dialogue. That begins to tell you, again, how little people are aware of their own narcissism. The question goes on. Thank you for posting the original podcast that I was describing, Maddie, for the listeners. Episode 322, if you're listening. The question goes on to say, in narcissism, is narcissism in a mother different than other narcissists? Can only certain children be targeted within the family to be controlled by a narcissistic mother? I noticed that my younger siblings were most affected and have strong codependent qualities. Again, it's about consistency. So the more consistent the individual displays this kind of narcissistic behavior of blaming, minimizing, gaslighting is a very common feature of a narcissist's behavior. The more global it is and consistent it is, the more that the person qualifies for the diagnoses. But since I've mentioned already that everybody has some, then yes, there are some people that are going to be more of a target, that are going to be more likely for the narcissist to project onto them the bad parts of themselves that they can't accept, the limited parts of themselves that they can't accept. In terms of mothers or father, we don't really think of it to distinguish between mothers and fathers, except for in this one way. Men tend to demonstrate, males, or those who identify as, tend to demonstrate a narcissism that's more grandiose. It's not universal by any means. But it's more accepted in our society for men to be braggadocious, for men to be confident. Women get punished for that, even with healthy confidence. So as a result of our cultural construct that I've just mentioned about the way that women and mothers and men and fathers should be, what happens is that mothers tend to be more of the covert or the depressed or the deflated narcissists. And so what that looks like is the poor me. You tell a covert narcissist, you hurt me, mother, or mother, I'm really angry at me, or when I was growing up, you didn't listen to my feelings adequately, whatever the feedback might be. And if she's a covert narcissist, what she will demonstrate or how she will respond is, yes, it's all my fault, which is another way of gaslighting. Or I can't get anything right, or I'm all the problem, blame it all on me. And there's this instinct then in the person talking that then it's their job to take care of, in this case, the mother. So the diagnosis, the grandiose version, tends to be more common in males and men and fathers, or those who identify as such. And with mothers, it tends to be more depressed, more covert, more deflated. And that just lines up with our cultural expectations and allowances for the different genders. Women are punished more for being confident, for speaking their voice, and so they're going to gravitate toward the more depressed, covert version of it. The question goes on even further to say, does the distinction of traits versus disorder matter at all for the people in their lives? I'm curious because your last Q&A, when you mentioned that if a mother never complimented you as her daughter and you asked her why, you would get validation if she gaslighted you and said this never happened, etc. I did ask my mother this, and yes, she said everything you predicted. It's much more of a matter of degrees. So does it matter if the person qualifies for the disorder or the just merely has the traits? My answer would be, the more severe the narcissism, the more severe the feelings of being injured by those that by the children or by the person in relationship. So it's much more of a continuum. The cutoff for the diagnosis is arbitrary to some respects. It's just a matter of severity. You might think of the traits from 0 to 100, and somewhere around 80, I'm making this up, somewhere around 80 perhaps, we cross the threshold. And so you're going to experience more pointed, aggressive, toxic kinds of abuse and gaslighting and dismissing and punishment. But, is somebody that crosses that threshold at 80, can they tell the difference and experience the difference between somebody at a 75 or a 70 or somebody at an 85? It's probably a very gray area. But suffice it to say that virtually everybody that I've ever met in my life, in any context, has some narcissism. I rarely meet individuals who are, unless they've done a lot of work therapeutically, or unless they're enlightened, which I don't really meet a lot of enlightened people. And the ones that I meet that are enlightened talk about their narcissism. And that's a real interesting observation, isn't it? That the more you can talk about and own your issues, your diagnosis, your mental health struggles, the less sick you are. So when I'm in therapy, for example, as a client, and I come to my therapist with some confession of some sort, some self-awareness, often laced with shame and guilt, because that's what we were taught to associate with our humanness, with our fallibility. When I come to my therapist with the confession of something I've done or said, or even some label that I placed on myself, she'll often say in a very gentle, encouraging way, she'll say, that's really good that you can see it. That's really great that you can see how you've gaslit your children, or how you've narcissistically wounded your children. We don't talk in those kind of technical terms, but that's the energy. Same with my client. When they come to me talking about something they did, I don't try to falsely make them feel good by saying, oh, you're not that bad. And you don't, I say, good job. You're seeing parts of yourself. And I say it with love and affection and warmth, because that's what mental health is. It's less about, at least in terms of a process, it's less about getting better and being improved and being good. And it's more about owning your fallibility, owning your humanness, owning your faults, knowing what your themes are. I said in the Audacity to Be You that one of the three keys to enlightenment is know what your mental illness is and remain on speaking terms with it. Everybody listening to me has a style, a way of coping with pain and trauma and difficult and ambiguity and uncertainty and fear and hurt. Everybody does. And under higher and higher levels of stress, when it surpasses our ability to regulate, either because in the given moment, in the given day, we're hungry or tired or the stress is cumulative, whatever it is, everybody has a certain style that they gravitate towards. Some people drink. Some people create this self-image of greatness and that nothing is their fault. That's the narcissist. Some people respond with anxiety, trying to control everything. And at the extreme end of that becomes obsessive compulsive behavior. Some people become very depressed. In other words, they repress all of their feelings. They bury them. But everybody has a style. And, narcissism is one of those few styles in our mental health vocabulary and in our lexicon of mental health ideas and illnesses that everybody, you can kind of see it in everybody to a part. You can see it in anxiety. You can see it in depression. You can see it in alcoholism. You can see it in OCD because it is the childhood wound. It is a core wound that everybody has experienced at some level or another, some much, much more than others, but everybody has experienced not being seen. Everybody was raised by human parents, by humans. And because everybody was raised by human people, which is to say people that are limited, that are not perfect, at times the child was made to feel like they were the bad object in the equation, that if they were upset, it was because of some misunderstanding that they had. If they were upset, it was because of some twisted or distorted thinking of theirs. If they were upset, it was because they weren't grateful enough or they were too sensitive. The list goes on and on. And when you experience that dismissal, that lack of resonance, that lack of attunement, the question then becomes, how do you cope? And if you're only rewarded for the good things, then of course, to be quote unquote bad, to be your horrible, rotten self, as I write about in the Audacity to Be You, is a great, great risk. And I think what happens around midlife, and I don't think it's an accident that midlife happens around the time that our children become teenagers. So what happens around midlife is we get to the point where we're pushed to sort this out. We're tired of trying to be good. We're tired of trying to be what everybody needs us to be. And if we don't wake up to that invitation to become ourselves, then our children will demonstrate mental health symptoms sometimes to expose the parts of us that are unhealed. So they'll come to us and they'll say, yes, I'm stealing and lying and doing drugs. Yes, that's true. But it's your fault. You're the one who caused it. Or at least you're the one who caused the pain that I am, in essence, self-medicating. And if the parent is incapable then of showing up as a more whole adult and saying to the child, thanks for talking about it. I'm glad that you're talking about it. Thanks for telling me. I hear you. Even if the language is exaggerated and extreme in the child, as it often is, because after some time of not being heard, language tends to become exaggerated. So we hear past that. If you're a boss at work, if you're the adult in the room, if you're the parent, it is your job to take care of yourself so that the people that you serve, the people that you love, the people that you have some responsibility towards can come and they can show up and share their true feelings. But if you haven't healed the narcissistic wound, if you don't know that you're okay, as imperfect as you are, then you will have to be good. So when the employee or the child or the acquaintance or the partner comes to you and shares their frustration, their hurt, their disappointment, their anger, that's the moment. That's why in psychotherapy, I just taught this in in-service this morning to our field guides. In psychotherapy, the goal is to be different than the parent. And there's an advantage to being a professional in this equation, because your child could tell me, for example, how angry they are, that they think I'm a bad therapist, a bad person, a stupid, whatever it is they decide that I am. That is a lot easier for me to handle than if my own child says it. I've assigned more weight. I've unfortunately assigned more of my sense of self to my own children. And so when they tell me they're hurt, or I let them down, or I'm not a good father, that's more difficult. And that's another reason why a therapist can be so helpful. You get to tell me what you feel and think, and I will be the adult in the room. But I cannot tell you all how few therapists, even if they understand with me, even if they agree with me conceptually, what I just said, the vast majority of therapists will gaslight their clients in the same way. I've had numberless examples where clients have told me that they confronted their therapist, told their therapist something where they hurt them, and the therapist has turned it around and made it about the client. I have done that. Earlier in my career, I did it a lot. I do it less and less now than I used to, but I still slip. There are still moments when I feel inadequate, when I feel unsure of myself, when I don't want to be the bad object. I need to be the good one. So I make my client the bad one. Hopefully, especially with the practice I have of my own supervision and my own psychotherapy, I'll come around to that and apologize. But that's the moment of magic, really. It reminds me, many, many times I've had clients come to me, parents come to me and say, my young adult says they don't trust me. My young adult is mad at me. My young adult doesn't want to have a relationship with me. What can I do to reverse that? And the answer that I give invariably is, don't try to reverse that. It's only in not trying to reverse that, in a sense, in a way of thinking, it's only in not trying to reverse that you can gain their trust back. And so what it sounds like, and these aren't the exact words, I don't mean the exact words, but what the energy sounds like is when a child says, I don't want to have a relationship with you, I don't trust you, your response is, I'm glad that you told me, and I'm sorry. And I trust, or I believe, that you have a good reason for these feelings. And I'll respect the boundary that you put up. And I won't try to be intrusive, and I won't force you, and I won't badger you, and I won't lecture, and I won't nag, and I won't relentlessly pursue you, and I won't require you to forgive me, to get over it, to give me another chance. If I do any of that, in essence, I am proving your point. So when an adult child doesn't need you financially anymore, even if they do need you financially, but they say these things, I don't want a relationship, the response is essentially, tell me more, and I will listen, and I will go to my therapist, and I will learn how to show up. Some years ago, when I was separated from my wife, before we got back together, my mother called me, and she said to me, she thought it was her job and her duty to give me a lecture about marriage. Mind you, my mother had been divorced twice, from my father and then later on from my stepfather. But somehow she found the moral high ground in the equation to tell me that she thought what I was doing was wrong, that I shouldn't get divorced, that I should give it another try, that I made a commitment and I should stick it out. And after a little while, basically saying to my mother, I'm not open to your feedback in this area, she said to me, I think it's my responsibility as your mother to teach you right from wrong. And I said, I really don't care. I mean, at the time I was 40 years old. And so I said, I don't care what you think your responsibility is. I even said to her, I said, Mom, I'm constantly beating myself up for this. I feel tremendous guilt and shame for where I am at this point in my marriage and the separation. And I don't need another person criticizing me. I'm doing a pretty good job of that myself. And so I said, I'm not threatening you and I'm not going to hang up in anger. But if you're going to talk to me like this, we won't be talking again. I won't be having conversations with you again. But if you can figure out how to show up and support me and love me and offer your support and in the ways that I might need it, I'm happy to keep talking to you, but I don't need this. And my mother, among other things, was flustered and hung up. She told me later that she was terrified that I was going to cut off my relationship with her because she had heard of people doing that with others. And she came back to me a couple of weeks later. And she said, I went to my therapist and told them what you had said. And I think I know how to support you. And she said, do you want to come out to see us and take the kids? You might need a break during the summer. My mother lives in Southern California. She said, you can take them to Disneyland. You can go out to a baseball game with your brother, and I can watch the kids some of the time. Do you want me to come out there and spend some time? How can I support you? And I thought that's what a non-narcissistic response would look like. She's the adult. She's there to support me. She doesn't need to be the hero or the self-righteous one. She just needs to be the person supporting me, as long as it didn't cost her too much. So the narcissistic response and theme is, can you be whole rather than good? Melanie Klein, one of the master therapists and clinicians in the psychodynamic theories, said that human beings go through two stages. The first stage is called the paranoid stage, she said. And the paranoid stage is that evil is out there, right? The enemy is out there. It's the other political party. It's the other religion. It's the other people that are not like me. It's the other race. It's the people that have other views on sexuality and gender. It's all out there. That's the paranoid phase. The second phase, which she said some people achieve and many do not, she called the depressed phase. And that is realizing that the enemy is in here. It's in me. The one that I need to be grappling with is me. I need to come to terms with, and she called it the depressed phase, in part because when you realize that you're the enemy, it's not a feeling of celebration. It's fairly depressing and discouraging. To take back our projections of evil out into the world, to take them back and to realize that we have those same issues, that we are the one that is in the way of our happiness, our serenity, our peace, our meaning, our success in life. To take those back as our responsibility is an incredibly courageous maneuver in life. It's why so few people do it. And folks, I just want you to hear this. The way that you'll recognize people that are healed or have done their work is you'll hear a lack of judgment. I forget it was who said it, but the quote goes something like this, is that most people, it's easier to judge than it is to think. And that's why most people judge, something like that. Ram Dass, I read lately, said that enlightenment, in essence, is non-judgment, is not judging anything. And that terrifies us. We are terrified of that idea because we're afraid if we don't judge, that we will devolve into hedonistic, selfish, self-centered, angry, abusive, toxic people. And that's not the truth. If we learn not to judge, we'll have more compassion. We'll see ourselves in others, even the people that we previously saw as our enemies. We will see them as human beings like us who come from imperfect backgrounds, who have urges to find some relief from the pain that life offers to us. And we will offer them our most compassionate self. So narcissism is not being overvalued or being indulged or being entitled. That sometimes is present with narcissistic development. But the reason that parents indulge children, the reason that parents foster a sense of entitlement, is because they themselves haven't healed their narcissistic wound, because they don't want the child to be mad at them. Because if the child is mad at them, then they're bad and they cannot be bad. So they are become incredibly indulgent. And the perpetuation of the narcissistic theme happens generation after generation. And this goes to one other point before I get to the next question. A really important point to make here is it's not about what you do. Mental health is not a measure of what you do or don't do. I mean, I think sometimes we think of it that way because that's what we observe, but mental health and mental illness are measures of who we are. So the narcissist or the borderline or the depressed or the anxious or the obsessive compulsive, they are what they are regardless of what they do. And the style of the way that they present can vary greatly within each diagnosis, each theme, each style, if you will, because that's all those things are. But becoming a better partner or a better parent is becoming somebody different. James Hollis says the biggest barrier in our lives is who we have become up to this point. So that's why our therapy at Evoke is, in this podcast, is about transformation. It's deeper and more fundamental than the things that we do or say. Those are just symptoms or signs or symbols of who we are inside. So if you don't feel okay about your horrible, rotten self, if you haven't accepted your shadow, if you haven't accepted the bad parts of you, and that's in quotes, the bad parts of you, because they're not really bad parts of you, they're just human. If you haven't become more whole, right? Carl Jung said, I would rather be whole than good. This is exactly what he was talking about, what I'm lecturing about tonight. If we don't accept ourselves and integrate and accept those parts of ourselves, we will need to be good, and that will come out in a narcissistic flavor, in a narcissistic trait, or if it becomes more solidified in a narcissistic personality disorder. Healed people don't talk about narcissists derogatory in a derogatory manner. They will talk about them compassionately. They will talk about them the same way they talk about anybody suffering from a diagnosis. That's another thing about narcissism, is it evokes the response of hatred. You want to knock the narcissist down. You want to prove that they are wrong. You want to prove that they aren't on the pedestal that they're putting themselves on. And as you probably all know from experience, or can at least guess, that's not how you heal narcissism. The way you heal narcissism is just like with any disorder. It starts with compassion, understanding, non-judgment, patience. Thank you for the question. All right, next question. Somebody writes, besides the parent seminar and finding you, what are, if any, other resources you offer to parents throughout the process? Is there a parent coach that can be invited in? And what about aftercare? How does Evoke aid in that transition? As a matter of fact, I have a slide right here that I post every time. We do have parent coaches. If you email us at coaching@evoketherapy.com, or if you go to our website and look at our coaching tab, we have many coaches with a variety of backgrounds. All of them have been trained in the attachment-based model that I'm teaching today, but they also have various niches and certifications and experiences. So yes, we have that. In terms of aftercare at Evoke, it's the podcasts, right? It's the webinars that if you are a participant or a parent of a participant, you are a lifelong member of our webinars. We have parent support groups on a weekly basis. For current and alumni parents, we have an alumni only meeting once a month. And we have once a month parents, not a parent. I can't even say it without saying parent. We have a support group for our coaching alumni and participants, and our intensives alumni and participants. So we have all of those to offer to people. We also have recently partnered with other parents like me. That's the slide that's up now. In fact, we've just worked out a deal that every family that goes through Evoke will get a free membership for a year with other parents like me. Prior to tonight, every announcement I've made is that you can have 1 month free membership. But if you contact admissions@evoketherapy.com, and you are current or recent alumni of Evoke's programs, you can attend one of their 17 or 18 Zoom meetings per week. So it's those meetings, it's our parent support groups, it's our coaches, it's these podcasts and these webinars. Those are all the services that we offer for our families. Any other questions? I've actually made several announcements already. Looks like that's all for tonight, and I think that's all that my voice might tolerate this evening. All right. In addition, my two books, The Audacity to Be You and The Journey of the Heroic Parent, are available on Amazon and Audible. I am running, in fact, I think it's going to sell out in the next couple of days. I am running my personal last Finding You of 2024, July 31st through August 4th. It'll be in the New York City area, so it's off-site. We're going to start doing these more regularly. So if you're interested, contact intensives@evoketherapy.com. The next one after that will be run by Emma Reedy. Some of you know who she is, and if you know her, you love her. Emma is our master facilitator. She'll be running the August 14th through 18th, and after that again, September 18th through 22nd. We have an online version of the intensives that's available once a month. So the next offering is August 9th through 11th. Those are also available to all of our current parents for free. It's about half the time. You can do it remotely from the computer at home, and it's about a third of the cost. So August 9th through 11th is that next offering. My wife and I are going to be hosting the Finding Connection workshop. It's basically a couple's version of Finding You. That'll be September 25th through 29th. I believe there's room, or there was last I checked, for one more couple. So you can check that out. Contact intensives@evoketherapy.com for more information or to sign up with any of these. Support groups, as I mentioned, this evening at 7 o'clock and in 20 minutes for our wilderness current and alumni parents. Just email supportgroups@evoketherapy.com for more information. August 19th is the next offer for alumni only. These are people that are a little bit farther along in the process. So August 19th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And then our next intensives and coaching support group is August 12th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I mentioned the coaches that can do a wide variety of support, clarifying boundaries, communication skills, parenting, family dynamics, couples and intimacy issues, codependency issues, post-intensive support, post nature-based therapy. We're calling our program nature-based therapy now. Post-nature-based therapy support to help you reintegrate into the family. So if you're looking for a therapist and you're willing to work virtually with a coach, this is an excellent option. Coaching@evoketherapy.com is that place to go. All of these broadcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. Just go to your favorite podcast app and search Finding You. Like us and subscribe there. You'll be notified when the new episode drops each week or twice a week. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen there. Or you can go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the video rebroadcasts of these. You can find Evoke Therapy Programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on X, Threads, and Instagram using the handles @EvokeTherapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. You can find Evoke Therapy Intensives on Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy Intensives. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, our blog has wonderful content each week. On Thursday of this week, I'm going to be talking about shame and guilt. This is one of those topics that I could talk about every week for an hour. I love talking about this. I definitely have some perspectives and takes on shame and specifically guilt that are uncommon sense that a lot of people aren't talking and teaching about. And I believe if you tune in and watch or listen, that even though that's not common, that they will resonate with you, because there's so much being taught out there that's just a little bit off, in my opinion. So I can't wait to teach and talk to you about shame and guilt. That'll be this Thursday, the 18th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you are current or alumni, tune in. If you are a podcast listener, then you can expect the episode to be dropped the next day. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you, and for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you. Thanks for showing up and being willing to do your work. It makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.